Ladies and gentlemen, upon consolidating power in July 1979, Saddam Hussein swiftly began dismantling all political opposition, transforming Iraq into a totalitarian one-party state, centered around a pervasive cult of personality. This rapid and ruthless oppression marked the genesis of decades of systematic and widespread human rights abuses, designed to maintain an iron grip on the Iraqi populace and fostering an environment of omnipresent dread. Famously described as a republic of fear, the atrocities committed during this period were not random acts of violence, but constituted systematic, widespread and extremely grave violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. Under Saddam Hussein's direct authority, the Iraqi security apparatus routinely subjected its citizens to torture. This consistent application of torture reveals it as a fundamental instrument of state policy, its primary objectives being to deter dissent, silence opposition, maintain absolute power, and even facilitate the acquisition of wealth and land. Indeed, the abuses were often executed directly or by the explicit command of Saddam Hussein himself, alongside a select group of 11 high-ranking officials, infamously known as Saddam's Dirty Dozen. This centralized command structure underscores the deeply institutionalized nature of terror, where oppression was a deliberate and calculated state policy, deeply integrated into the regime strategy for both political survival and economic gain. A particularly egregious aspect of the regime strategy was the implementation of collective punishment, where entire families or ethnic groups were subjected to torture or repression for the perceived actions of a single dissident. This horrific tactic aimed to broaden the scope of fear, making individuals hesitant to contemplate opposition by ensuring that their loved ones would suffer the consequences, intentionally sowing deep distrust and fear among people to fracture social bonds and inhibit collective resistance. Throughout this dark era, the international community, including the United Nations and various internationally based non-governmental organizations such as Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, consistently documented and condemned the regime's horrific record of abuse. Despite these condemnations and the imposition of comprehensive economic sanctions by the UN Security Council, Saddam Hussein largely ignored global demands, underscoring the regime's profound defiance of international norms and human rights principles. Among the most notorious sites of suffering was Abu Ghraib prison, located 32 kilometers west of Baghdad. Established in the 1960s, it served as a central hub for Saddam Hussein's regime to incarcerate political prisoners from the 1970s until its eventual fall in 2003, earning a notorious reputation for systematic torture and extrajudicial killings. The sheer scale of its use was immense. In 2001, the prison held approximately 15,000 inmates, and the regime even planned an expansion in 2002. The chilling evidence of Abu Ghraib's brutality emerged fully after the fall of the regime, when mass graves were uncovered at the site and its vicinity, providing irrefutable proof of widespread executions. Locations like Kandari and Al-Zahidi, on the western outskirts of Baghdad, contain the remains of nearly 1,000 political prisoners, with eyewitnesses reporting bodies arriving 10 to 15 at a time. From Abu Ghraib, mass executions were explicitly documented, including 101 people on December 10, 1999, further cementing its place as a symbol of immense human suffering. Another stark testament to the regime's brutality was the Red Prison in Suleimania, a compound of cinder block buildings spanning over 3,000 square meters. This facility served as the headquarters for Saddam's Red Security Intelligence. Its name derived from the red paint coating its facade, which became a living testimony of the bloody legacy it left behind. Below ground, 3 chambers were used to hold political prisoners and families of Peshmerga forces, notably including residents of Halabja after their city was gassed. Today, in a powerful act of reclaiming the narrative, the Red Prison has been converted into the National Museum of the Kurdish Revolution and victims, so that we may not forget. This transformation from a torture site into a public museum prevents historical revisionism and ensures the suffering is acknowledged, providing a tangible space for collective mourning, education, and healing for survivors and the broader community. It shifts the power dynamic from the hidden violence of the regime to the public remembrance of the victims. Beyond these prominent sites, Saddam Hussein's regime operated a vast, decentralized network of detention facilities. Reports indicate more than 300 prisons in Iraq, where torture was commonplace, suggesting a widespread infrastructure of repression designed to reach every corner of the country. Following the 2003 invasion, Numerous torture centers were discovered in security offices and police stations throughout Iraq, typically containing equipment indicative of systematic torture, such as hooks for hanging and devices for electric shock. Even Saddam's son, Hussein, was known to possess a private torture chamber. The methods of torment employed were varied and extreme, encompassing brutal physical assaults. Iraqi detention centers were characterized by routine and systematic physical abuse, with common methods including severe beatings, the breaking of limbs, and prolonged denial of food and water. The regime was known to have invented unique and horrific methods, such as electric shocks administered to sensitive areas, the pulling out of fingernails, suspending individuals from rotating ceiling fans, and burning victims with hot irons or blowtorches. Personal accounts vividly detail this cruelty. Al-Sheikh Yahya Muzzin Jafar al-Zaini recounted being subjected to electric shocks to his penis and feet, suspended from a window for 3 days, with a heavy weight attached to his genitals, a position he found more unbearable than the electric shocks. Cameron Isis was subjected to electrocution, where he was stripped, shackled, hung from the ceiling, and connected to high-voltage wires around his ears, toes, or genitals. Muhammad Abdul Karim al-Mufti endured severe beatings on the soles of his feet with thick canes or metal rod sticks, followed by salty water poured on his bleeding wounds. Beyond individual acts of torture, the regime engaged in the widespread use of chemical weapons, including sarin, mustard gas, and nerve agents. The most infamous incident was the 1988 gassing of the northern Kurdish village of Halabja, which killed an estimated 5,000 and wounded 10,000 Iraqi Kurds. Survivors like Shaho developed chronic back pains and inability to walk due to poison gas exposure, while his mother lost her sight, demonstrating the regime's willingness to inflict indiscriminate and widespread suffering on a catastrophic scale. Aiming to terrorize and eliminate entire communities, psychological warfare was systematically employed to break individuals and terrorize the wider population. Humiliation was a common tactic, with athletes having their heads shaved and smeared with feces. The regime's use of collective punishment extended deeply into the psychological realm, with families sometimes forced to witness the torture of their loved ones. Sexual violence was systematically weaponized, with rape being commonplace and often videotaped to blackmail victims and their families. Witness had testified at Saddam's trial about being forced to undress, subjected to electric shocks and beatings, and strongly suggested she had been raped by multiple security officers. The regime targeted a vast array of individuals and groups, ensuring that repression permeated all levels of Iraqi society, including political opponents, ethnic and religious minorities, and even children. The Kurdish people were systematically persecuted, with an estimated 182,000 killed or disappeared during the Anfal military campaign, qualified by some European countries as genocide. Shia Muslims were suppressed through killings and arrests, with up to 200,000 Shia marsh Arabs killed and their marshlands drained after the First Gulf War. The total number of deaths and disappearances related to repression is estimated to be at least 250,000 to 290,000. The legacy of Saddam Hussein's regime is a deeply scarred population, with torture survivors, their relatives, and the families of the dead continuing to live with crippling psychological pain, including widespread instances of post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), depression, and anxiety. Many survivors bear permanent physical disfigurement and chronic illnesses. The pervasive nature of torture and collective punishment suggests a deep intergenerational transmission of trauma, with children forced into military training and families compelled to pay for executions, ensuring that the psychological wounds extend beyond direct victims to entire family units and subsequent generations, hindering national healing and reconciliation. The trial of Saddam Hussein, which began on October 19, 2005, focused on charges of crimes against humanity and genocide. Despite being found guilty and subsequently executed on December 30, 2006, the trial faced significant criticism from international human rights organizations, deemed unfair by Amnesty International, and a flawed trial by Human Rights Watch. However, the documentation of these atrocities and the memorialization of their victims, as exemplified by the Red Prison's transformation into a museum, serve as crucial acts of remembrance and education, essential for healing, preventing future abuses, and ensuring that the lessons of this dark chapter are never forgotten. This profound legacy of terror continues to shape Iraq, manifesting in widespread intergenerational trauma, societal distrust, and ongoing challenges to stability and development. The stories of those who suffered stand as a stark warning, etched into the collective memory of a nation.